Welcome back to I Was Today Years Old When I Found This Out, Bible Edition. And today we're going to talk about John chapter 11, verse 17. And when I read this, you're probably going to be like, Maddie, that's not significant. But that's what I found out today. It is significant. So far in chapter 11, Lazarus has passed away, and Jesus is going back to Bethany to mourn with his sisters, or so they think. And so, in verse 17, it says, "On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days." And my whole life, I've just read over this verse. Like, I've ignored it. I'm like, oh, he's been in there 4 days. That's, I guess, a little longer than Jesus has been in there, but I mean, what's significant about that? But then I read this footnote, so I'm going to read it to you, okay? And it just blew my mind. Death and burial usually took place on the same day in Jesus' time due to the hot climate. The body was carefully but hurriedly wrapped in strips of cloth with expensive spices and ointments. Jesus probably began his journey to Bethany the day of or the day after Lazarus' death and burial. The journey took 2 to 3 days. When Jesus arrived in Bethany, Lazarus would have been in the tomb 4 days, which John carefully noted. Jewish tradition taught that the deceased person's soul hovered over the body for 3 days after death in hopes of reunion. However untrue, this superstition was widely believed. The fact that Lazarus had been dead for 4 days instead of 3 left little doubt in Jewish minds that Lazarus' restoration to life by Jesus was in fact an unmistakable miracle. So basically, John is just giving us another little Easter egg about why Jesus has done something. While at first the 4 days seems insignificant, if you read it in the context, you realize that he was basically giving a little test to himself so that he could truly prove to people that he was God in the flesh. By doing this, he's not only showing that he has the power to raise others from the dead, which in turn will show later on that he has the ability to do that to himself, but to also demonstrate that only his power was able to make this happen. Because he is God in the flesh, he is the Messiah, and there was nothing else that caused Lazarus to raise from the dead, because if he had just waited the 3 days, then they could have said, oh, well, his spirit was just hovering over his body, but no. He purposefully waited 4 days so they could be like, oh, like, guess that it actually has to be him. It's little simple facts like these that always blow my mind because Jesus was so intentional with everything that he did, from the amount of time that he left in between his different miracles to where he performed them to who he performed them for. Everything is so very intentional because we serve a living God who does not want us to have blind faith. Rather, he wants to give us reasons as to why we have our faith so that we can confidently proclaim it to others. So I hope you enjoyed this little tidbit of information. I hope you have a great rest of your day. God bless.